Lost horses, a lonely rancher, and the neighbor who rode in with everything. The third horse went missing on a Tuesday, and I didn't notice until Wednesday morning when I counted heads at the East Trough and came up short. That was the kind of man I'd become. I stood there in the cold November, the sky the color of old pewter, and counted again. 2 sorrels, the gray. The bay gelding I called Rudd because of the rust patch above his left eye. 4, should have been 7. I walked the fence line and found the gap at the far corner post. The wire laid flat in the mud like it had been pushed down slow and deliberate. Not a break, not a storm. Something had been pulling horses out of my pasture for 3 weeks, and I had only just now bothered to count. My wife used to count every evening. She'd stand at the kitchen window with her coffee cup going cold and count them off, one by one, the way some women count their children. Margaret. She died 4 years back, February, quick as a light going out, and I had not counted horses since. I followed the tracks north through the mud, past the creek, into the stand of cottonwoods that marks where my land ends and Hester Vane's begins. Hester's husband Dale had died 2 winters before Margaret. Dale and I had been neighborly without being friends, 2 men who nodded when they passed on the Meadowra road and kept to their own business. I had not been onto Vane land in a long time. I walked through the cottonwoods anyway. The tracks led to her south pasture fence. The wire there was down in the same fashion, laid flat, not broken, and in her pasture, mixed in with her horses, 3 bays, a paint, and a small black mare I didn't recognize, were 3 of mine. I could tell Rudd's rust patch from 50 yards. He was eating alongside Hester's paint like they were old friends. I stood at the fence line for a moment. My hat was wet. My boots were wet. I was 58 years old and standing in another woman's pasture in the cold because I had not been paying attention to my own life for 4 years. The back door of the house opened, and Hester Vane came out. She was wearing a canvas coat, her dark hair back in a single braid that had come half loose. She was maybe 52, 53. I didn't know her age. I knew her horses and her fences, and that Dale had kept poor accounts and left her in a rough position when he went. Beyond that, she was just the woman to the north. She stopped on the porch step and looked at me standing at her fence with my hat in my hand. I had taken it off without thinking, and she said, "Those yours?" I said they were. She said, "Third time." I said, "I know." She came down off the porch and walked to the fence, and we stood on either side of it. She had a strong face, not pretty in the way you think of pretty, broader than that, with good bones and eyes that were used to judging distance. She looked at me the way you look at a fence post you're deciding whether to pull or leave. "Your corner post," she said, "east side of the cottonwoods. It's rotted through at the base. I could see it from my saddle 2 weeks ago. I should have checked it." "Yes," she said, "you should have." No softening to it, no apology for the plainness. I liked that. I hadn't realized until just then how tired I was of people talking around things. "I'll bring them back this afternoon," I said. Or she said, "You could fix the post." I fixed the post that afternoon. She brought out coffee in a tin cup and set it on top of the fence rail without a word and went back inside. I drank it standing up in the cold with my hands dirty, and the coffee was very strong and tasted like it had been sitting since morning. I drank all of it. I kept to myself after Margaret, not out of grief exactly, or not only. More that I didn't know who I was when I wasn't her husband. We had built the place together, the 2 of us, 26 years of it. Every beam, every post, every decision about which pasture to rest and which to work. I had opinions, but she sharpened them. I had plans, but she caught the holes. When she went, I kept working because work is what you do, and the ranch didn't care about my grief, but somewhere in those 4 years I had quietly stopped paying attention to things. The fence posts. The horse count. The roof on the south barn that I had been meaning to see to since the summer before last. I don't say this to sound sorry for myself. It's just the truth of what happens when you've been half of something for a long time and then you're whole again. You don't feel whole. You feel like a thing missing its counterweight. You list. You don't even notice you're listing until somebody points at the rot in your corner post and tells you plainly that you should have checked it. December came. I was putting in a new section of fence along the north line, the right thing to do, fix the source of the problem, when Hester's truck came up the dirt track and stopped. She got out with a post hole digger in the bed of the truck and a bag of quick-setting mix, and she said, "You need a hand." Not a question. "I can manage," I said. "I know you can," she said. "I'm offering anyway." We worked until the light went. She drove the post hole digger the same way she did everything else, without fuss, without commentary, digging where it needed to be dug and moving on. She had good hands, calloused and deliberate. At one point she took the tamping bar from me without asking because I was doing it wrong, packing the gravel unevenly, and she tamped it herself and handed the bar back, and we said nothing about it. When we finished, she leaned on the last post and looked back along the line of new work and said, "That'll hold." "It will," I said. "You do good work when you're paying attention." I looked at her. The last light was going orange behind her, and her braid had come loose again, and she was looking at the fence, not at me. "I haven't been," I said, "paying attention." "No," she said. "You haven't, not to a lot of things." She picked up her post hole digger and put it in the truck bed and drove back to her place. I stood at the fence line watching her tail lights until they disappeared into the cottonwoods. I went home and I sat at the kitchen table in the dark for a while. Not sad exactly, more like a man who has just been handed something and is trying to figure out what it is. January was hard. A stretch of cold that cracked the water lines twice and killed 3 of my calves in a single night. I was sleeping 4, 5 hours and working the rest and eating badly, crackers and cold coffee, and whatever was left in the cans. And one morning I came in from the barn and found Hester Vane's truck parked in my yard. She was on my porch. She had a pot. An actual cast iron pot with a lid, still warm. "Elk stew," she said. "From the bull we took in November, I made too much." She handed me the pot and turned to go. "Hester," I said. She stopped. "Stay," I said, "if you don't have somewhere to be." She considered it the way she considered everything, squarely, without rush. Then she came back and we went inside and I put the pot on the stove and we sat at the kitchen table with the stove going and the wind hitting the east window, and we ate together, the 2 of us, for the first time. We talked about the cold. We talked about her south pasture and whether she should sell the 2 older horses in spring, which she thought she probably should. We talked about the roof on the south barn, and she told me the name of a man in Dickinson who worked cheap and did it right. Practical things, range things, the conversation of 2 people who know what the land requires. At one point she said, "You have a good operation here." "It's been neglected," I said. "It's solid under the neglect," she said. "That's the difference. Some places you let go and the rot is all the way through. This place, you let go of it a little and it waited for you. You built it to last." I didn't say anything. The stove ticked. "Margaret helped you build it," she said. Not a question. She had known Margaret not well but enough. "She did," I said. "That's something to honor," she said, "what you built with her. Not something to apologize for." I had not known until she said it that I had been apologizing for it. That every time I looked at this house and this land I had been feeling the weight of it as a kind of failure, the failure of being the one who stayed. As if surviving Margaret was something I had done wrong. Hester got up and put on her coat and I walked her out to her truck, and the cold came at us both. She stopped with her hand on the door and looked at me, in that direct way she had, and she said, "You know what I noticed when I first met Dale?" I said I didn't. "He was honest about what he couldn't do," she said. "Most men aren't. They'll say they can fix a thing and make it worse, or they'll pretend not to notice the rot because noticing means having to deal with it. Dale said, 'This thing is broken and I don't know how to fix it. Will you help me?' I married him 2 weeks later." She paused. When you told me you should have checked the fence post and you didn't pretend otherwise, I noticed that. She got in the truck. I stood in my own yard in the January cold and watched her go. Spring was better. She let me run 3 of my heifers on her south pasture through April, and I pulled her truck out of a mud ditch in March with my team and didn't mention it, and she didn't either. We had a way of keeping accounts without keeping score. It suited both of us. We ate together more. Sometimes at her place, more often at mine, because I have a bigger kitchen table and the stove draws better. The conversations grew longer but not chattier, still practical, still range and weather, but with a longer tail now. What we each remembered about the early years, mistakes we had made in those years, decisions we were glad of, and decisions we still chewed on in the early hours. I had been alone for 4 years, and I had not realized how hungry I was for exactly this kind of conversation. Not small talk, not commiseration. Talk between 2 people who have both done the hard work and know what it costs and don't need to perform anything for each other. One evening in May she was at my table and we had finished eating and the lamp was burning low and she was looking at her hands on the table, the way she does when she's working something out. I waited. "I'm not looking to be taken care of," she said. "I know that," I said. "And I'm not looking to take care of someone who doesn't want to be." "I know that too." She looked up. "What are you looking for, Clem?" Nobody had asked me that in 4 years, maybe longer. I thought about it honestly. I said, "I'm looking for someone who will tell me when my fence posts are rotten." She held my eyes for a moment. Then something shifted in her face, not a smile exactly, but the thing underneath a smile, the thing that comes before it. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Her hand was rough from work, the grip steady, and she left it there. "I can do that," she said. "I want to say something about what it feels like when a woman like that chooses you. Not a young man's version of it, not fireworks, not a hammering heart. Different, older, more like being found. You have been walking around half visible for years, going through the motions, doing the work, existing in the margins of your own life, and then someone looks at you straight and says, 'I see what you are, not what you were with someone else, not the grief you're carrying or the years you missed, what you actually are,' and they choose that. They choose you knowing the ledger, the neglected fence posts, and the rotten corner, and the horse count you didn't run for 3 weeks, knowing all of it, and they put their hand on yours anyway. That is the only word I have for it, found. We didn't make a ceremony of it. That wasn't our way. Hester started keeping a few things at my place in June, her good knife, her coffee, a wool blanket she liked. I started fixing things with more care because I wanted her to see that I was paying attention now. Small proof of a larger thing. In July, I repaired the south barn roof. I hired the man she'd recommended, a younger man named Garrett who worked clean and fast, and I was up there alongside him 2 days because the rot was worse than I thought and required more hands. Hester came by in the afternoon of the 2nd day and looked up at us from the yard. Garrett came down for water, and I stayed up on the ridge, and she shaded her eyes and looked at me up there, and then she shook her head slow with something that was close to a smile. "You're going to break your neck," she called up. "I'll be fine," I said. "I know you will," she said. "I just like saying it." Garrett told me on the drive down at end of day that his grandfather had talked like that. I asked him how his grandparents were. He said they'd been married 41 years and still liked each other, and that his grandfather would fix a thing just to get his grandmother to come look at it. I thought about that on the way home. August. The horses were right. 7 in the pasture, all where they should be, and I counted them every evening now, not out of worry but out of habit relearned. I stood at the kitchen window where Margaret used to stand and I counted them off, and then I went to set a second place at the table because Hester was coming. There was grief still. I want to be clear about that. It doesn't go. You carry it and you learn the weight of it, and after a while it's just part of your balance, the way a saddlebag shifts your hip when you're riding. You adjust. You ride anyway. What I hadn't expected was that you could ride better with someone beside you than alone. Not because they carry your grief. You don't ask that and they couldn't anyway. But because they can see when you're listening and they say so, plain, without dressing it up. And that alone is worth more than I knew how to measure. Hester came at 6, the way she always did, and she hung her coat on the hook by the door and looked at the stove and then at me and she said, "You didn't burn it." "I didn't burn it," I said. "First time this week." "Third," I said. She pulled out her chair and sat down, and I brought the pot to the table, and we ate together with the window going dark behind us, and the lamp burning between us and the horses in the pasture, and the fence posts solid in the ground. That's how it was. That's how it stayed. And if you ask me now what I was before she rode in, before she stood on the other side of a fence post and told me plainly what I should have done, I would tell you I was a man who had stopped counting, who had let the rot go because noticing meant having to deal with it, who had been invisible so long he'd half decided that was all there was left. I was wrong. She knew it before I did, and she chose me anyway, without ceremony, without making a performance of it. She just put her hand over mine and said she could do that, and she has, every day since, in all the plain and ordinary and necessary ways that matter. I am not the man I was before Margaret. I am not the man I was those 4 empty years after. I'm something else now, something that has been found and knows it and is grateful for the plainness of it. The horses are right, the fence posts are solid. Hester's coffee is on the stove. That's enough, that's more than enough, that's everything.